Hello and welcome back to Heart of the Holte. Today we have our first big interview. Now me, Dan Morgan and Ollie Mason had the pleasure of going down to Villa Park to meet the one and only Brian Little. In part one of our series, Dan Morgan talks to Brian Little about his Villa youth career and the grounding that gave him in becoming such a wonderful player for Aston Villa. Now, before the video starts, I have to say that Brian Little was just such a lovely, kind, and above all, funny man. I think that I can say on behalf of all of us that we were smiling from the minute that we went into the room to meet him, from up until the moment that the interview finished and we had to leave. So, without further ado, here is the video. Please like, subscribe, and share, but most of all, enjoy.
Hello and welcome back to Heart of the Holte. Today we're at the glorious Villa Park with Brian Little. How are you doing, Brian?
I'm good, thanks. Good to see you.
Yeah, you too. So to start off, let's talk about your playing career. So you came to Villa in the late 60s and early 70s. What drew you to this magnificent club, and was there any other clubs in for you at the time?
Yeah, when I was the system going back to the 60s is a million miles different to what it is today. I basically played for my school team, played for East Durham boys, and from the age of 12, the first club I ever went to was Port Vale, believe it or not, as a 12-year-old, and Stanley Matthews was the manager of Port Vale. I got a wonderful picture of myself, my two brothers, with Stanley Matthews. You could see my dad had us to the barbers because we'd had a ball put on our head and it shaved round the sides, short back and sides and a lot off the top. My dad used to do to us. No wonder I rebelled later on in my life. But so that was the first club I ever went to, and then I started. It was different, but from playing school football and my representative team, I went to Leeds United, I went to Manchester City, I went to Burnley, Newcastle, Sunderland. Before Aston Villa heard about me, and Aston Villa heard about me through the assistant manager here, a guy by the name of Malcolm Musgrove, who was assistant to Tommy Cummings. Malcolm played for West Ham, and Malcolm is a distant relative of my mum's side of the family. So my mum had obviously been talking to her sisters and her brothers, and Malcolm, the message he got to Malcolm that that I was playing football and clubs were taking an interest in me. So sent a scout to the northeast who straight away said, look, get Brian down to Villa. And I have no hesitation saying that I'm not trying to win the pats off the back of anybody, but the minute I came here I just knew I wanted to come here, and they were in the second division at the time, but I can still remember sitting up in the old Trinity stand watching the game, and I just loved it. I just thought, wow, that's where I want to go, and I was offered an apprenticeship at 15, so I just packed my bags. My dad took me to Durham Station, gave me £1 10 shilling, and that was it. I left home at 15 with a pound in my pocket. £1 10 shilling, brilliant. And I've never looked back since, really. And I still, to this day, I can sit here today and it still gives you a great feeling being here. It's a wonderful place, a great football club. I've been blessed in many respects, but came here at 15, and it wasn't easy for me at first. I had a pretty tough first season. Even though I wanted to come here and I left home, for the first few months I found it very difficult living in digs, and being away from my mum and my dad and my two brothers and our little dog, and so it's not as easy as you think. It's not as easy as you think, but I guess I knew that I was settling in. I went home, I think I'd been here 3.5 months, and they said, right, Brian, you can have a trip home now. So they stuck me on the train at Birmingham up to Durham. And the first thing I did when I got back home, I went up to the local youth club on the first night I got there, where all my friends from school would be, and I was just a million miles different to them. I thought, whoa, I've changed. They went, whoa, you've changed, and I just knew those. I was in a man's environment, a football environment. At 15, we trained with the first team. Everybody trained together. I had pre-season with everybody. And I realised then how much I'd changed. And I've never been homesick since. Never been homesick since. I knew this was the place for me to be, and as soon as I came back I settled into it and dug down a little bit, got a bit deeper into it. And but my first 3 months were hard, but I realised when I went home how much what sort of effect it had on me.
Yeah, I think sounds like you did settle in quite quickly, winning the FA Youth Cup in 1972 against Liverpool. So how did it feel to win that as your first sort of trophy?
Well, we were a third division football team at the time. The team won promotion to back into the second division, which is the Championship now. And that season I'd played in the first team. The last game of the season I'd played in the first team as a sub in October. So when I was 17 I played on as a sub against Blackburn. Before we ran round the pitch with the Youth Cup, we played the last game of the season, and I played against Torquay and scored. Winning the Youth Cup was brilliant because we're a group of lads who come to what was a third division football club. You know, my brother was here with me by then. John Gidman was here by then. Jake Finley in goal, Bobby MacDonald. There was a bunch of us. Tony Betts even played in the first team a few times. There was a bunch of us who played in the first team at 18-year-old, and the club had clawed its way back into the now Championship Division 2 as it was then, and we had some incredible crowds here. You know, we had great crowds. Everybody remembers the Bournemouth game who was around in that time. You know, we played Bournemouth with Ted McDougall, and I can't remember, it was 50-odd thousand people here. That Holte was open. This north stand was the old Whitton Lane. We used to have to sweep the terrace and all sorts of things after games. I used to burn rubbish at the back of here. You know, I mean, so many memories of things that we used to do. But to have won the Youth Cup as a kid, to have played in that youth team with my brother, to on the back of that being, if I turn the clock back 2 and a bit years, to leaving home at 15, to being selected to play in the England youth team. I mean, it was just an incredible couple of seasons, really. You know, it's like all of a sudden I'm a man. You know, I'm playing man's football with a lot of men. You know, because footballers then days, generally speaking, were around the 30s and they were rough. You had to, I used to be terrified as an apprentice going in the first team dressing room, and you'd see Brian Godfrey and Andy Lockhead and George Curtis, and they were men. You know, you used to think, ooh, look at the size of him, I'm massive, and I mean, Brian Godfrey was, God bless him, Brian was a great person, but like he'd come in the morning and by the time in the afternoon he needed a shave in the afternoon, and I remember as a 15-year-old he used to frighten me, so because I used to see him in the morning and like by the afternoon you'd think, oh, he's got a beard now. It's like I remember that was one of my abiding memories of some of the lads, how you'd see them one minute and the next day you think, crikey, they were like, so you were 15, you hadn't got a hair on your face or anything, and the next day they looked like so unshaven and everything, and it was unbelievable. Because when you're 15, I mean, I've got a boy now, 15. I can't imagine him leaving home.
Yeah.
And I keep saying to him, when I was your age, I was sweeping terrace and cleaning boots, burning rubbish, doing this. Life is it's an incredible period. So, I do go off on a tangent because I just love it. It's a great place. I have so many things that remind me. But winning the Youth Cup, fantastic. Playing for England Youth, incredible. Beating Liverpool. I mean, that year in the youth team we had 20,000 people watch us when we played Birmingham, 16,000 when we played Chelsea, something like 16,000 when we played Liverpool here, 12,000. I mean, the crowds were incredible for young lads to be playing. And there was such a buzz around the place at the time because everybody knew there was a group of players who could play, and there was going to be a fair amount of us got into the first team and helped the club on a little bit. So there was a tremendous buzz around the place. And at that time there was myself making headlines along with our rival over the other side of the town there, Trevor Francis. So Trevor and I were taking a lot of headlines. It was a great period. Brilliant period, and I'll never forget it as long as I live.
So on the road to winning the Youth Cup, we beat West Brom and Birmingham. Are local derbies like that for you memorable?
Yeah, they are. I mean, it was ferocious. You know, I mean, I've been brought up with playing Birmingham City on Parks pitches in youth football. You know, and hey, let me tell you, there was no messing then. You know, it was physical. It was unbelievable, and that rivalry that built up in you was phenomenal. Really, you know, all of those to have gone through all the stages. Yeah, you know, and I think especially when we were kids, there was a lot of good kids in our team. There was a lot of good kids in the Birmingham team, and then we'd often see each other uptown. You know, when like if we did have an afternoon where we could go shopping, and we always used to just go uptown and sit there and have an ice cream somewhere, which, you know, was, I don't think many of them be able to do it now, sort of thing. But you know, we used to sit there and basically on different tables to each other and just growling at each other, sort of thing. You know, it was brilliant. Because we had a few rough lads. I mean, they had one or two, you know, Kenny Burns and people like that you didn't mess with too much. But we had a lad called Roy Stark, and my brother, of course. I mean, nobody messed with my brother, let me tell you. It's great having a younger brother who could look after you. Let me tell you, he's looked after me all my life. But we had a few tough lads. And they had, but the rivalry, to get that rivalry from 15, it's right in you. It's the sim. I can understand. I can relate to fans, how fans can, because they've had it from very young age. As a player, you know, I haven't just turned up at 28-year-old and oh, we're playing Birmingham next week and I don't know any of the Birmingham players. I grew up with Trevor and Kenny Burns and all them. You know, and we had massive rivalry between us.
So at that point you've made some first team appearances. Do you think Villa being in the third division allowed young players like yourself to get more opportunities?
No, to be honest, I think it was probably more difficult then. You know, there were men. I mean, you know, like I said, when I came here as a, you know, when I came here, we had something like 40 odd professionals. You know, you had a first team, reserve team, youth team, A team, and every Friday at 12:15, the team sheets would go up on you know, it was as basic as that. So you were either in the first team, the reserve team, the intermediate team, or the youth team, and no two ways about it. If the first team were playing Newcastle here or whoever, the reserve team would be up at Newcastle, the Central League, so there was like the reverse fixture, and youth team was different, obviously, but you know, you'd be sitting there on Fridays going, I wonder what team I'm in. You know, if you were in the youth team and you got dropped down to one team, or if you were in the youth team and got promoted to the reserve team, you were on the, you know, it's a strange thing to explain because it just doesn't happen like that anymore, you know. But for young people for me, my first few games here, even as a 15-year-old, I bypassed the youth team. I went straight into the reserve team. I came back because I had a little bit of a dodgy spell, but my first games were in the reserve team with men, and I'm 15. You know, and I keep saying that now. I've got a 15-year-old son at school. I've got two lads who are way past, but I can remember and I can relate that to them being 15. And they were nowhere near men. And my lad now is nowhere, but I was playing with men, you know, at Newcastle, at Manchester United. When I was 15, I played against Paddy Crerand, and I was a midfield player. And the coach said to me, Brian, you're a great runner. You'll run Paddy Crerand crazy. They carried me off after 60 minutes. I was absolutely shocked. I couldn't get near him. Just clever, brain. You know, he had a brain. He was a man. Played for Manchester United, international footballer. And there's a coach telling me I'd run him riot. But they carried me off. I was absolutely shattered after 60 minutes. Couldn't get near him. Just so you learn things in a different way. And if you did something wrong, you've got men shouting at you, and it was cruel. It was quite tough, you know. It was not forgiving at all. You were working in a man's world. You'd left school and you were straight into industry. You were right at it. You know, society's changed so much in many respects now, hasn't it? Because you don't want 15-year-olds in amongst it. But for me, I look back at my upbringing, and my upbringing made me grow up so quickly. And develop quickly. I don't regret it one little bit. You know, whether I was frightened some days or not, it doesn't matter. You know, I learned things very quickly. But it was completely different ball game in those days. So the difference of seeing those teams and you know, the disappointment of even then watching a first team player who'd been dropped. And he didn't get told, it was just his name was put on the team sheet, dropped. You can see, I can still see their faces, oh, I'm chucking stuff against the wall, because, you know, if he's a first team player and he's married with 3 kids and he's not getting his first team appearance when he's in the reserves, he's gutted. He's absolutely gutted, you know. So it was a completely different feel about football back when I first started. It was a real tough game in those days.
Wow. Yes, guys, that is our first exclusive interview with the club legend himself, Brian Little. We'd like to thank Brian for his time and allowing us to come down to the club and speak to him about his glorious career. I speak on behalf of both Dan and Ollie, and we really did have an absolutely fantastic time, and it was wonderful to hear the stories that Brian had. And we've got more to come for you guys. This is only part 1, so make sure you stay tuned, subscribe to Heart of the Holte, like this video if you enjoyed, comment your thoughts below, and get ready for the next part. Up the Villa.